Ila Gurudev ki jai, Iman Mahaprabhu ki jai, Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai, Grantara Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai, Shri Bhramara-gita ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Gaur Praman Hari Hari Gaur. So, good morning to all of you. Welcome. Here we are, continue with our series on Sri Bhramara Gita, the song of the Bumblebee. Today we are in our 11th meeting where we will continue discussing this most important and esoteric, mysterious section of the Srimad-Bhagavatam, chapter 47 of the 10th Canto. Today we will be studying the 6th verse of Bhramara Gita, which is the 17th verse of this chapter of the Bhagavad. So we are starting, let's say, the second half of our discussion, the second half of the verses that comprise the Bhramara Gita, and the second half of the whole series as well, since we will have I think, some 5 more concluding sessions as we had 5 introductory ones. So let's make, as usual, some brief recap of what we were discussing last week. 5th verse of the Song of the Bumblebee. As usual, Sri Radha in her Divyan Mat, divine delirium, she interprets that the bumblebee is humming around her feet, and he's trying to beg forgiveness from her in the name of his friend and master, Sri Krishna, who is in Mathura. So, thinking that the bumblebee is doing so, while actually he's attracted by the fragrance of the lotus feet of Sri Radha, mistaking her feet by 2 lotuses, but she reads reality through the lens of her particular bhav. So she interprets that the bumblebee is begging forgiveness in the name of Krishna. So she shouts, not even speaks, this 5th verse, telling the bumblebee, keep your head off my feet. I know what you are doing. You expertly learned diplomacy from Mukunda. Now you came as his messenger, with flattering words. But he, Mukunda, abandoned those who for his sake alone gave up children, husbands, and all other relationships. So basically, he's simple and grateful. So, conclusion, Sri Radha says, why should I make up with him now? So, in this way, Sri Radha is insulting the bumblebee, by extension, insulting Krishna in the context of loving him. Basically, sarcastically telling the Bhramara, the bumblebee, oh, you are such a good disciple. You learn so nicely from your guru. You should be the successor of Acharya of your guru in cheating. Mukunda. Mukunda means the one who gives liberation, who liberates you. So Sri Radha sarcastically said, he liberated us from husbands, sons, and relatives. He deprived us of all that, playing his flute. Even he deprived us from any prospect in our future life of auspiciousness, because we transgressed all dharma for the sake of him. So we left everything for his sake. In other words, the gopi accepted sannyas in the most substantial sense of the term. All the sannyas implies rejecting so many things for the purpose of Hari. And as we know, as we already mentioned, Krishna tried to reciprocate with that by he himself accepting sannyas as Mahaprabhu and trying to repay back some of the love debt he acquired with the gopis. So Sri Radha is saying here, we left everything for his sake, and for his sake, he abandoned us. So for his sake, we left everything. For his own sake, he left us. Therefore, he's akrita cheta, which could be translated as ungrateful, or also akrita chitta can be translated as he with uncontrolled mind, or he who has not given his heart completely to us. Whatever the case, it applies to this particular situation. So Sri Radha will say, therefore we won't make any peace with such a person. If you bumblebee come here in the spirit of conciliation, that won't happen. Because again, we left everything. As we mentioned, parakia implies to leave to give up certain relationships that even devotees in Golok in other rasas do not have to give up. Jashoda doesn't have to give up Nanda to love Krishna. Subal doesn't have to give Sridham to love Krishna, but the gopis have to leave everyone else in society to love Krishna. So that's a very unique feature of this Parakiya. So, well, in this verse that we are summarizing, Sri Radha is speaking one of 10 varieties of Chitra Jalpas, we know, mud talks, or colorful expressions, Chitra Jalpas. In this case, called Sanjalpa. That speech with the cries, the ungratefulness from the beloved, and other bad qualities with deeply sarcastic words and insulting gestures which are connected to the ungratefulness coming from the beloved. That's how Srila Rupa Goswami defines Sanjalpa in his Ujjval Nilamani. So, of course, we concluded our previous meeting reflecting over and over again for us as sadhakas how we are to embrace these teachings, how we are to incorporate what we are receiving here in such a way that may really upgrade our present condition and make us getting closer to this reality. And of course, Sri Radha is calling cheater Krishna. She's rather calling Krishna cheater here, all along the Bhramara Gītā. But we shouldn't call Krishna the cheater imitating Sri Radha in a purely external way. To begin with, we should call ourselves a cheater. We should acknowledge and recognize all the cheating propensities, kutinati, pratistas, and all this stuff in ourselves. And the more we do that in the context of bhajana, kriya, nartani, briti, healthy culture of Krishna bhakti, eventually we may reach the point in our perfect state that we may call Krishna cheater, but in a tasteful way, in a way that increases the experience of rasa for him, for us, for everyone there. And of course, something we also mentioned is that most of not only Bhramara Gītā, but all these sections connected to Madhurya Bhava especially are connected with Paroksha Bhat. Paroksha Bhat means indirect speech, indirect language, which is very unique and very characteristic of romantic dialogues and affairs. And Krishna himself said, Paroksha Bhadarisaya Paroksham Mama Chapriyam. This indirect speech is so dear to me. All these sages speak in those terms, enigmatic, mysterious, indirect, and I love that very much. So since Krishna loves Paroksha Bhat so much, Sri Radha will mostly only speak Paroksha Bhat. Naturally, that will flow from her lotus tongue, if you will, this crooked speech that is not explicitly, overtly saying things as they are, but in such a way that only those who have the ears to hear, the eyes to see will appreciate that. And the context of this Paroksha Bhat, we also shared some verses from the Hamsadutta, this beautiful poem from Rupa Goswami, where Lalita sends a message through a Hamsa, through a swan to Krishna in Mathura, describing the condition of Braj, and Sri Radha in particular, and many of these verses again were in Paroksha Bhat. Today we will share some of them at the end as well, but first of all, let's begin officially today's lecture by sharing the verse, the 6th verse of Bhramara Gītā, which may be the most well-known verse of the whole Bhramara Gītā. So I will share the verse with you in the chat, and I ask some of you to please share it also in the thread, in the Facebook thread that we are streaming as well. So there's the verse, and I will recite it first in Sanskrit and then share the translation. Mrigayari Bhakapindram Vibhyadhe Lukha Dharma Sriyama Krita Virupam Strijita Kamajanam Balimapi Balimatvadishtaya Dvangshavatyash Tad Alamasita Sakhyayudustya Jastatkathartham. So, the translation says thus: like a hunter, he cruelly shot the king of the monkeys with arrows. Because he was conquered by a woman, he disfigured another woman who came to him with lusty desires. And even after consuming the gifts of Bali Maharaj, he bound him up with ropes as if he were a crow. So let us give up all friendship with this dark complexioned boy, even if we can't give up talking about him. So this is the 6th verse of Sri Bhramara-gita. Let's share also a little bit the connection between this verse and the previous one, where Sri Radha is, of course, referring here to Krishna, and interestingly, to Krishna and his other avatars, Ram, Padmanabha. So Sridhar Swami, the ancient commentator, he mentions that furthermore, thinking over Krishna's prior activities, again in previous lifetimes, Sri Radha will express in this verse, I'm afraid of him. I'm afraid of dark complexion people. So in this verse, she will present this idea. And interestingly, Srila Jiva Goswami, in his Gopal Shampoo, will introduce this verse by saying that Sri Radha gives the previous mood, and she speaks again here with transformations arising out of deep affection, which are unappreciated by the ignorant. So this is a very important point, because again, you externally, superficially may read this verse and think there's no affection here. She's only insulting Krishna, calling him names, abusing him, bullying Krishna. But Srila Jiva Goswami mentions all these words come from transformations. We could call these samchari bhavs, different transitory ecstasies that affect Sri Radha Thakurani's speech. And all of them arise from deep affection. In the same way, like Sanchari Bhav is like a wave arising out of the ocean of Sthai Bhav, of her main defining emotion that Sri Radha has for Krishna. So out of that deep affection, these different waves of ecstatic expression are coming. And Srila Jiva Goswami says, they are unappreciated by the ignorant. So in other words, we need to educate our hearing, our tongue, inner tongue, to relish properly these type of sections, which seem something else, but actually are so deep, so full of rasa. So if we are ignorant, if we are not educated in the science in rasa tattva, if you will, we may just misread all these incredible sections of the Bhagavatam. So it's very important. And that's part of the purpose of this series, gradually trying to train our ear, our eyes, our tongue, in internal terms, to properly honor and relish these sections. So again, this is maybe the most well-known verse of the whole Bhramara Gita. Let's go to the word-by-word translation and then trying to unpack its content. The first line says, Mrigayur Ivakapindram Vipyade Lubdhadharma. So Sri Radha here, as we mentioned, he expresses the century bhav of fear, and not only starts to abuse Krishna, but now as an extended version of it, she still criticizes him, but in the form of his previous descents. Like Ram, Sri Ramachandra, and Bhamandev, mainly in this verse. So first line has to do with Sri Ramachandra. Mrigayur means a hunter. Mrigayur Iva. Mriga Ayur means he whose life, Ayur, is Mriga, animals. So he subsists on animals, a hunter. Mrigayur Iva, just like a hunter, Kapindram Bibhyade. Bibhyade means shot. So he shot who? Kapindram. Kapindram means the king of monkeys, which refers to Bali. Not to Bali Maharaj. He will come late then with Bhaman in connection to Bhamandev, but here's Bali, the king of monkeys, who was shot by Ramachandra. Lubdha Dharma. Lubdha Dharma basically means behaving like a cruel hunter, following that type of dharma, that type of function, if you will, that corresponds with those type of people. So first line corresponds to that particular moment in the life of Sri Ram when he shot Bali. So Sri Radha is criticizing Krishna's cruelty by speaking about himself as Sri Ram and how he acted with Bali. Then the second line says, Sriyama Krita Virupam Strijita Kamajanam. The second line is also dedicated to Sri Ram in another direction. Striyam means woman, Akrita means maid, and Virupan means disfigured. So he disfigured one woman, Strijita. Stri means again woman, in this case, and Jita means conquered. So being conquered by one woman, he disfigured another woman. So who is the woman he was conquered by? Sita Devi. He's referring to Ramachandra. And who is the woman who was disfigured? Surpanaka, Ravana's sister. Kamayanam. Kamayanam means impelled by lusty desire. So Surpanaka approached Ramachandra impelled by lusty desire, and instead of reciprocating with her, she rather criticizes Ram. He disfigured her. He ruined her life, basically. That's the second line, corresponding again to Sri Ram. And the third one is dedicated to Bhamandev, the dwarf avatar. It says, Balim api balim atva bestaya dhvangcha bhatjas. So Balim refers to Bali Maharaj. Api balim, also Api, Balim means tribute, the second Balim, the offering that Bali Maharaj offered to Bhamandev when he asked for charity, as we know. Atva bestayat. Atva means consuming, abestayat means bound up. So after consuming, after taking whatever Bali Maharaj offered, abestayat, bound up. This dark complexioned person, bound up, referring to Bhamandev, bound up Bali Maharaj, Dvangshavat, yes. Dvangshavat means like a crow. He tied Bali like a crow. And then the last line says, Tadalam asita sakyaya dustyajas tatkatarta. So now last line presents the conclusion. Therefore, this person is so crooked, not even in this present birth, but even in previous births. Therefore, tat means in this case, therefore. Alam means enough of this. Asita is a very important word in the verse. Asita means sometimes it's translated as black, and referring to Krishna, dark complexion boy. But strictly speaking, Asita means non-white, which is an indirect way of saying black. Remember, Sri Radha is fond of indirect speech, but here in the ecstasy of the sanctuary bhav of fear, she's so fearful even to pronounce the word black, which Krishna may be translated as black, or Shyam may be translated as black, that she will only refer indirectly to him as saying the non-white person. Asita. Sakyai, then, Sakyai means friendship, all kinds of friendship, enough of all these types of friendship. And interestingly, the last part of the verse, which may be the most well-known of all, she says, Dustyaja tat katarta. Dustyaja means impossible to give up. Tat means about him, kata arta. Kata means topics, and arta means like the speaking of that, the elaboration of that. So let us give up all friendship, all types of relationship with this dark complexioned boy, even if we can give up about doing that, even if it's impossible for us to do. At least speaking about that. We can try to give the relationship, but we cannot stop speaking about him. That's a very important point that we will try to highlight along our discussion today. So let's start with the different commentaries, tikas to this verse in order of seniority, if you will, starting by Srila Sridhar Swami, the ancient revered commentator of the Bhagavad, and then continue with Srila Sanatana Goswami Pad, Srila Jiva Goswami, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. So Sridhar Swami mentions that when Sri Radha mentions here, acting like a hunter, as we mentioned, Mrigayur Iva, with Bali as Ram, actually means, in the cases we mentioned, cruel. He's exhibiting cruelty. And try to bear in mind, whatever Sri Radha is saying regarding other Leelas, other avatars, it all applies to her subjective experience with Sri Krishna in this particular situation she is in. So another idea Sridhar Swami mentions, and that will be repeated by other commentators, that actually if a hunter shots an animal, generally it's mrigayur. The idea is that mrigayur, he subsists on the animal, he eats their flesh, and that's why he's killing them. But in this case, Ramachandra was not shooting Bali to eat his flesh. So the point is that was unnecessarily cruel, basically. That shows his cruelty, that's the implication. And next, Sridhar Swami explains the second line, which Sri Radha suggests or says it overtly. He was controlled by one woman, he was controlled by Sita, he was an attached Grihamedi or whatever. And then therefore he took Surpanaka, whose means of subsistence and gain was Cupid. In other words, her beauty was one of her main features, and she was disfigured by him. Actually, Lakshman was the one who disfigured Surpanaka, but that was in the context of protecting Ram and so on. And Ram agreed with that. So he cut her ears, her nose, you can imagine, in the form of Dasarati Ram. And similarly, Sridhar Swami paraphrases Sri Radha with the third line. He took Bali Maharaj after cheating him, as you know, offering Vamandev, appeared begging for some dakshina, and Bali Maharaj offered whatever he liked. And he said only 3 steps of land, and eventually he took everything from him with those 3 little so-called steps, 3 brick kram. He who makes 3 astonishing steps. So after taking whatever Bali Maharaj offered, that's not all, but like a crow, he bound him up basically in the form of Vamandev, and then he threw him down into the lower planetary systems. That's all described in the Bhagavatam also. So Sri Radha's conclusion is, therefore, let's end all friendship with Krishna. And if the bumblebee at this point will reply to her, okay, if you are so determined in that direction, if this is so, then why you are always speaking about him? If he's so wretched and so condemned, why you cannot stop chanting about him? And Sri Radha replies with the very last part of this verse, Dustyajas Katartha. According to Sridhar Swami, he translates that as the treasure of his topics is very difficult to give up. Difficult to give up Harikatha. Relatively easier in comparison to live Krishna, but to live Harikatha, that's a very unique form in which Krishna comes to our lives. So these are the words of the Bhavarta Dipika, Srila Sridhar Swami's commentary on this verse. So let's continue with what Srila Sanatana Goswami Pad has to say, has to share today, reveal in his Brihad Vaishnava Toshani Tika. So first he will share a general meaning flowing in the footsteps of what Sridhar Swami say, applied to these members of the Das Avatar pantheon, Ram and Vamana, and eventually he will share another meaning, interestingly connected exclusively all the lines with Krishna himself. So in the general meaning, Sri Radha, according to Sanatana Goswami Pad, is saying to the bee, you just hear the qualities of your friend. You want to hear the qualities of your friend, your master? So then she begins to criticize him. First of all, he shot the best of monkeys, not any monkey, but the best of monkeys who had no fault whatsoever. Then he's called conquered by woman, Sanatana Goswami said, because Sanatana Goswami presents this other idea. Radha calls Krishna's Ram as conquered by a woman, by Sita, because Sita represents like a competitor to Sri Radha, similarly than Lakshmi. Sometimes this jealousy appears in Sri Radha, criticizing other of her partial expansions, as we know, like Lakshmi or Sita. Or in this particular context, in separation and divine loving competition, they appear as competitors, ladies. So she's criticizing her in that context as well, not only Ram and Krishna. And then third line, Sanatana Goswami says, he's compared to a crow, which, and here's another idea. The crow sometimes comes and eats the offering that were meant in sacrifice for the devatas. And not only eats those offerings that were not originally for him, but injures other people. So the parallel, of course, try to bear in mind the parallel. The gopis are saying, we belong to other men. Parakiya means I belong to someone else. So we were meant for someone else, but Krishna comes like a crow and enjoys all these offerings. Try to apply all these examples to what Radha experiences and injures people. He comes, enjoy us, takes from us all the honey, Madhusudan, drinks all the pollen from our lotus hearts, and then injures us. How? By leaving us. Or another idea, Sanatana Goswami says that he was cruel and insulting by binding Bali as Vamandev tightly, as if Bali were a crow. So these two ideas are like if Bali were a crow, he tied him, or he himself behaved like a crow. And of course, this also, Sanatana Prabhu says, shows his ingratitude. Bali Maharaj gave his own self to him, Atma Nivedanam. And what did he do? He tied him and sent him to Patala Lok. So he's dark, he's black, not only externally, but internally. His heart is dark, deep black. And his friends become black like him. Birds of the same feather flock together, like you, Bumblebee. Indirectly, Sriraj is saying. Therefore, let us give up any friendship with black people, basically. Here you cannot tell to Radha, Black Lives Matter. We prepare for her reply. So she uses the plural here. She says, let us give up friendship with that black person. So the plural Sanatana Goswami mentions is indicated to imply complete rejection of all types of friendship with him. So let us give up friendship, in plural, all types of approach of addressing with this black personality. And to be more precise, Sanatana Prabhu reveals another layer of meaning in which all the lines of the verse, in this case, are not connected to Ram or to Vamandev, but all of them directly, exclusively to Krishna. And of course, the other ones who are connected to other avatars indirectly are connected to Krishna, all of them converge in them, as we mentioned. But what's the meaning he gives to these lines in connection to Krishna? He said, well, like a hunter, he shot the best bull. Kapindram can mean the best of monkeys, but also the term Kapindra means one who shakes the earth. So it can apply to a bull. So this idea is connected to Aristasura. Krishna killed a bull. A bull is a very personification of Dharma. And we know all the story that transpired after that, the whole manifestation of Shamkunda, Radhakunda came out of the killing of Aristasura and so on. So the first line, instead of being applied to Bali and Ram, it's applied to Krishna and Aristasura. The second line, which was applied originally to Ram and Sita, Sanatana Goswami says, being lusty, he desired deformed woman, like Kubja. So instead of saying he deformed another woman, he disfigured another woman who approached him with lust, like Surpanaka in relation to Ram, here Sanatana Goswami says, Krishna himself is so lusty that he even desires disfigured ladies. And this applies to Kubja. We know that in Kubja is like henchback, you say henchwoman, in Mathura. Although we know Kubja herself approached Krishna trying to enjoy with him. But Sri Radha here will see everything in a particular perspective. So he's so lusty that he's attracted even to the formed woman. And the third line, which generally is applied to Bali Maharaj and Vamandev, regarding how Vamandev took everything and devoured the offerings. In this case, it's applied to Krishna in connection to the Govardhan-lila. He devoured the offerings made by the cowherds and rejected the worship of Indra. He ruined the whole offering. He took it for himself. We know that Govardhan showed himself to be not different from Krishna, so he himself ate all the offerings. He rejected the worship of Indra, as Vamandev act as he did with Bali Maharaj. So again, according to Sanatana Goswami, but after describing these first three lines, all of the commentators mostly will say, well, after this, the Bumblebee will reply to Sri Radha, then why do you speak about him if he's such a dark person? And Sri Radha will say, well, he's the goal of all speech in Braj. Kathartha. Kathartha can mean elaboration on topics about him, but also kata artha. Artha can mean goal, objective, or necessity. So he's the converging point of all kata in Vrindavan, all Gramya kata, or village talk, Braj is a village, all converges into Krishna. Spontaneously. Nobody there can speak about something else. That's the nature of the place. So Sri Radha replies to the Bumblebee according to Sanatana Goswami in this way. He's the goal of the speech in Braj. So we cannot stop speaking about him. Although we know, although one should not speak about him, it is a forbidden topic, especially for us married, chaste ladies. But what to do? We must speak about him because we are in Braj and everyone here is absorbed in speaking about his activities. It is not by our will and we cannot leave Braj. So what can we do? We are in an environment where everything flows in that direction. So it's a very interesting point, what happens in this verse. And also, of course, one extra added feature in this connection is how Sri Radha here shows in separation from Sri Hari, she's experiencing Sudura Pravas, which is the type of extreme separation with Krishna is somewhere else, long distance. And it is said in Shastra that Aishvarya tends to come into the surface in the moments of Vipralamba, in separation, not in union. In Sambhog, Aishvarya won't be expressed by the Brajavasis. But in separation, sometimes Aishvarya can appear, come to the front, but only to nourish Madhurya or intimacy. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur gives this example in his Raghavarma Chandrika, showing how Aishvarya, he says, Aishvarya manifests itself at the time of separation in Braj, but in a sweet way, nourishing the rasa, the sthayi bhava of each devotee. So he will share this example, Sri Radha speaking in Divyanmat, and showing that she's aware of the previous avatars of Krishna, which means Krishna's avatari. He's the supreme, the source of all divine descents and so on. All this carries the implication. She has the awareness that Krishna is God, but that's totally buried into layers of intimacy. But sometimes, when the sometimes example is given, when you may the whole milk, boiling milk, is the madhurya of the Brajavasis, and the Ishvara is like a blade of grass thrown into a pot of boiling milk. So immediately that would be swallowed. You cannot see that, but it's there. And sometimes when that boiling milk overflows, you may have a chance of seeing that blade of grass coming out. So that's overflowing means separation. When the feelings of the Brajavasis, especially Sri Radha, overflows in the unique way. And sometimes that Aishwarya comes to the fore for a minute, but not to create distance, but to nourish the intimacy. So Sridhar Swami also comments on this verse in this connection. He says that during separation, Śrīmatī Rādhārāṇī will perceive Krishna's divine Aishwarya, his God, he has avatar, so on, and this reminds her of his past and his previous descents. Here we see that. But again, all that, she will take it in the context of continuing her Chitra Jalpa, increasing her Divyan Mat. So these are some ideas, some of the ideas shared by Srila Sanatana Goswami Prabhu. So we will continue with Srila Jiva Goswami and his Lagu Vaishnav Toshini. He has some other sections like the Gopal Champu and Krama Sandarbha, many extended commentaries on the Bhagavad. So we'll have some considerable revelation to share here. So bear with me, fasten your seatbelt. So according to Sri Jiva, here Sri Radha is implying, O Bumblebee, those who have dark complexion, whoever, are extremely crooked. And of course, Bumblebee has dark complexion for sure. So those of dark complexion, those non-whitish, are extremely cruel, crooked, merciless, irreligious. So it is not that I'm afraid of the behavior of your friend in particular, but I'm very much afraid of dark complexion people altogether, whoever it may be. And again, not only Krishna is dark complexion, not only the Bumblebee is dark complexion, but Uddhav is dark complexion. Uddhav is almost exactly like Krishna. So you can imagine Uddhav is there present and hearing all the things, witnessing Sri Radha's different sanchari bhavs, waves coming and going, increasing the ocean of her sthayi bhav. So Sri Radha implies this: not only do I fear the activities he does, but also the nature of his color. That blackness is so scary. Look. His evil heart is completely black. Again, it's not only his complexion. His heart is black. Everything about him is blackish. And of course, by saying this, Sri Radha gets further and further absorbed, engrossed in thinking about Sri Hari, even in his other forms, which are not blackish necessarily, Ramachandra, Bhamandev, but something similar, close to that, if you will. Some greenish thing, dark on some level, Bhamandev. So again, here we are witnessing Sri Radha's Sanchari Bhav, or again, Sanchari Bhav means one of the 5 ingredients of rasa, bhakti rasa: Sthayi Bhav, Vibhav, Anubhav, Sattvika Bhav, and Sanchari or Vyabhichari Bhava. We won't explain them in detail here now. But Sanchari Bhava is transitory ecstasy, which comes for a moment, nourishes the main feeling, the Sthāyi Bhava, and then continues. So here she's showing Nirbheda, says Jiva Goswami. Remorse also in that context. So this is so intense that she becomes afraid even when pronouncing, as we mentioned, the word Shyam or Krishna. Shyam means black, Krishna means black. So she's not using directly the word Shyam or Krishna. She's just using the word Asita, non-white, not white, which is another way of saying black. For the three examples given in this verse, Sri Radha is referring to them as non-white. They're not white. We're not speaking about Ramachandra 2 times, 1 time to Vamandev, even to Krishna. Her ecstatic Vyabhichari Bhav takes her to not even be able to pronounce the word. And sometimes in Shastra, it is described what happens when Sri Radha enters into a particular mood when she does not want to have anything to do with blackish people or even with blackish objects. For example, of course, here Sri Radha is exhibiting pravas, this particular type of separation. But when she's in man, for example, sulky mood, sulkiness, jealous love, she's angry with Krishna and she doesn't want to see anything black. Not only people, but anything black. For example, generally we know that Sri Radha's Sakis, Manjaris dress her in a blue sari, decorate her with bluish bangles, eyeliner, kajal, mask drop here on the chin. All of this is Krishna's color because all that externally showing what's going on internally. She's absorbed in Sri Hari. But when she becomes angry with Krishna, she doesn't want to see or to hear anything connected to him, not only to hear or speak his name, although she cannot, as we can see, but she doesn't want to see any blue, blackish object that may remind her of him. So she will take off her blue sari, she will take off her blue bangles and her sapphire necklace, and she will change all of them for ivory, you say, bangles, a pearl necklace, a red sari, nothing blackish. She will remove the blue mask pictures that were drawn on her chest. She will remove the mask tilak that was drawn on her forehead. All of this, again, blackish. She will remove the blue kajal or dark black eyeliner painted around her eyes. And she will replace all these items with decorations made with white sandalwood paste, covering it with white, the opposite of that. For example, on her beautiful chin, there is a drop of mask resembling like, it is say like a sleeping bumblebee. And she will paint some white sandalwood paste over it with the end of the straw, trying to cover that. And if she did all this properly, even though she may go out and she may see a dark rain cloud, so she will put an umbrella there, not to see the black rain cloud. Or even she will say, I don't want to see my friend Shyamala anymore, a very close Saki to her. Because why? Because her name Shyamala reminds me of Shyam. So anything that has to do with Shyam, with black, I don't want to see that anymore. And it says she will whitewash all the tamal trees in Braj, which has the complexion of Krishna. And she will stay away from peacocks because their feathers remind her of Krishna. Or if she sees a black bee at the base of some tree, Sri Radha will become scared and her eyes will become filled with tears, it is said. Again, similar to what we are speaking here, and the bumblebees here. And maybe at some point, because of the ecstatic sweating, the sweating removed the white sandalwood paste, and she may just walk and casually see her own face and see the black mask dot on her chin again, because the white sandalwood paste was removed. She will take the mirror that she was seeing that face and smash the mirror on the floor, breaking that into 100 pieces and so on. So again, all this in the context not of psychological dysfunction, but the topmost degree of ecstasy. So Srila Jiva Goswami Pad continues saying that thinking of Krishna as being non-different because of similar qualities, she will show the faults in Ram and Brahman, these ones who are famous. To begin with Ramachandra. Ramachandra is famous for being Dhirodhata. He's one of the main four types of Nayakas or heroes in the aesthetic literature. And Ram in particular, that is very sober and very rightful, very dharmic. Ramachandra himself is Maryad Purushottam, the very personification of beauty, the very highest example of Dharma. But she will show faults in him. So the point is, if someone like Ramachandra has faults, what to speak of Krishna? If Dhirodhata, Dasarati Ram, has so many faults as Shirada is pointing to, what to speak of Dhira Krishna, who is a carefree enjoyer and prince in the village whatsoever. So then she, according to Sri Jiva, starts to describe each of one of them. Not like a hunter without mercy, a person who was dark in complexion, again, not mentioning any name directly because of fear. He was filled with greed for killing, for cruelty, and killed Bali, the king of monkeys. And the monkey should not be killed, but well, that happened, let that be. And then he disfigured the daughter of Visrava, which is Surpanaka. She was full of desire, and with how he reciprocated, he cut her nose and ears. And at this point, Jiva Goswami presents the argument of the bumblebee. He may say, well, the hatred of a brother because of a woman causes this. Lakshman was Ramachandra's brother, and he was protecting his brother, and he attacked Surpanaka because of that. And Surpanaka was a loose woman. So attacking them is justified. The bumblebee may say that. So Sri Radha replies, according to Sri Jiva, shame on you. Actually, all this happened because of a different reason. Sri Ramachandra was controlled by a woman, by Sita. That's why he attacked Surpanaka. We have the famous example. He even was so controlled by Sita that he killed a deer for her. You will remember this famous story where Sita Devi wanted this golden deer, and Ram was after it, whatever, and trying. And she said, even if it has to be killed, okay. So he shot. Of course, we know the deer was not the deer, was a mystic personality. Was a long story, and that was how Sita was kidnapped, or Maya Sita was kidnapped by Ravana. But the point is, he even killed a deer. So cruel. That's well known. And even if the bumblebee will argue at this point, well, he's a Kshatriya. So there is place for cruelty, for killing animals and things like this. It is customary in the Kshatriya families. Cruelty is not fully inappropriate. There is place for expressing that in certain contexts. So Sri Radha will go, okay, let's go to the third example to completely make checkmate with your arguments. So she wants to the third line of the verse referring to Vamandev. Another person, another Asita, a non-blackish, non-whitish personality. In this case, Brahmana, Brahmin by birth, not Kshatriya, a Brahmana. A Brahman is expected to show all these different qualities. Samodamas, tapaso, chanchantirar, jamami, vacham, jnana, vijnana, nastikyam, and so on, the Gita says. Peacefulness and tolerance, being equipoised, Brahman. But such a Brahman tied up Bali, who had the highest sense of dharma, who offered himself fully. So this so-called Brahmana enjoyed all the articles of worship from Bali, and they tied him. He removed Bali from his position. He was master of the three worlds. Bali Maharaj was pretty powerful. And he made him enter the Patala, the Netherland, the lower worlds. So basically, he's acting like a crowd, not like a Brahman. The crowd that comes, as we mentioned, devours the offering meant for the devatas, and surrounding people by calling other crowds and then surrounding the house, abusing them, torturing them. So in this way, Jiva Goswami paraphrases Sri Radha. The first line, when she speaks about killing others, shooting Bali, that indicates Krishna's heart nature. Remember, all this has nothing to do specifically with Ramachandra Bamdev. It all has to do with Krishna. So she will take the Das avatar and make them converge into the figure of Krishna in the context of criticizing all of them. So killing others indicates his hard nature. First line. Second line, being controlled by woman indicates his lust. And third, enjoying the gift of others in an ungrateful way indicates deceit. And remember, all the things apply to what Radha feels regarding Krishna being present in Braj now. Hard-hearted person, lust, attracted by other ladies, as Ram is attracted by Sita, Krishna attracted by other ladies in Mathura. Deceit, he say, I will return, he never returned. So Sri Radha concludes, what's the use in establishing any friendship whatsoever with a dark complexioned person? So again, Sri Jiva Goswami will present the argument of the bumblebee with some slight difference, saying, why then do the sages describe Krishna with excellent words? Srila Jiva Goswami takes this position regarding the bumblebee in direction to the sages. And Sri Radha will say, well, describing his character in this way, the sages are showing actually their own faults. And although they have faults, Krishna's powerful and bewildering energy makes the sages attracted to him and instills fear in them. Again, she's projecting her own sanctuary bhav into the sages. All of them are fearful, and that's why they say what they say. Actually, a person does not become as fearful of a violent animal as one becomes fearful of seeing a person who pretends to support Dharma. Again, criticizing Krishna in all his forms. So what can a tiger do? Basically, she implies. You can flee from him in fear, but one should instead fear the person who has a violent heart, but thinks he has a fine character. So sarcastically, she said, now Krishna now is part of the aristocracy in Mathura with cultured people in the big city. He thinks he has this fine character. He has a black heart. And of course, the conclusion of the verse again is, why you continue speaking about him? Well, he's hard to give up. His nature is completely bewitching. He's the all-attractive. So Jiva Goswami says these words express fear and hatred. All of them being sanchari bhavs, remember, all of them being crucial ingredients, spices in the whole masala of bhakti rasa, if you will. So Sri Radha once again implies, we can leave everything black, but the subject of our talking is always black. We can leave Krishna. We cannot leave Krishna Katha. We can leave the blackish boy. We cannot stop talking about blackish issues. Again, Black Lives Matter. So this is the end of Srila Jiva Goswami's commentaries along his different commentaries. So let's finish our discussion on different tikas on this verse of the Bhagavad by going to the revered Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and his revered Sarartha Darshini commentary on the Bhagavad. So for him, here the bumblebee seems to say to Sri Radha, oh Sri Radha, as far as I can see in Mathura, soft-hearted Krishna is simply meditating upon you. So according to Vishwanath, this is the background to this particular verse. Before she speaks this verse, the bumblebee is suggesting that in the name of Krishna. Like, as far as I can see in Mathura, Krishna is simply meditating upon you. And we know that's true. Let's bear in mind, Krishna is not actually ungrateful and cruel and all this stuff. She's really loving and caring and is absorbed in Sri Radha. But love moves in a crooked way. So it seems something else of what it actually is. So Sri Radha replies, according to Vishwanath here, you say that Krishna is only meditating on me. You are just an inexperienced servant of him. You are new to Mathura, it seems so very clearly, because you don't know the facts about Krishna. You don't know who he is actually. So not only the point she makes is not only he's cruel in this very lifetime, but even in many previous lives, he has been so. We have heard that from Purnamasi. So the gopis will express themselves in those terms in the context of the Lila. It's not that we know that, but Purnamasi told us Krishna in his previous descents, he was this, he was that. That's one way to take it as well. Purnamasi is Gurvi, the acharya of the whole branch. So then, of course, comes the three types of asita, the three types of non-whitish person or black personalities, or black with black means impure also. In this case, first of all, of course, Ramachandra, so Sri Radha says, one asita has secretly killed the monkey king Bali with his arrows, but secretly, again, in a coward way, hiding behind a tree, shooting an arrow on his back. That's totally like adharmic, like a merciless hunter. And on top of that, the thing is that a hunter, again, we say mrigayor is someone who will take the flesh of the killed animal and survive on that. But those who are hunters do not kill monkeys because they know that the monkey flesh, monkey meat, is unedible, it's uneatable. You cannot even sell that flesh anywhere. But this person, this asita, because he was endowed with a blackish complexion, he acted in a way that is totally rejectable, even for a hunter, although he was the greatest among the righteous. So you can see how interestingly Sri Radha's Bhav takes her to make a very totally logical case against the most dharmic person, to the point of presenting him as worthy of criticism even by the hunters. She's showing this idea. Even a hunter will criticize how this so-called topmost dharmic person, Ram, behaved with Bali. So pretty ingenious, pretty inspired discussion. But of course, this is not enough. So she continues the second point. She will say, according to Vishwanath, now just listen to another instance of Krishna's irreligiosity. All this is speaking about Krishna, remember. It has nothing to do with Ram or Bhamandev, who of course are avatars of Sri Krishna. Second line, overcome with lust. A woman named Surpanaka, as we know, approached Ram and proposes some intimate relationship with him. And as a Kshatriya, he should have satisfy her. That's part of the Kshatriya Dharma. There's a whole psychology. In the Kshatriya, they should be able to reciprocate with whatever lady approaches them. That's stated in Shastra. So Sri Radha knows all these details of how a Kshatriya should behave, but in the context of criticizing Krishna. So instead of satisfying her, Sri Ram disfigured Surpanaka, cutting her nose, cutting off her ears. So nobody else can enjoy her, basically. He ruined her life. He gave her no further hope of being enjoyed by anyone. Because why again? His cruel nature. But the point is, the background of his cruel nature is he was attached to Sita also. So it's not enough to say he was cruel in nature. He was lusty. And all this again in the context of Krishna as a womanizer, as a lampata, and so on. So the point is, one may say, oh, but he acted like this because he was he was what? He was a monk and he didn't want to deal with ladies? No, he was not a monk. He was not upholding a vow of celibacy. He was like wearing matted locks and the dress of a renunciate. No, he was living with Sita at that time. So he was conquered by her love. And of course, all these arguments we could present in another way to glorify Ram and to glorify Sita, but Sri Radha is taking them backwards in the context of fulfilling her ecstatic purpose. Intuitively, she's not even thinking and calculating anything. And if this is not enough, we have the third line of the verse, when, according to Vishwanath, Sri Radha will say, similarly, not only as a kshatriya, which again has some license to be cruel and so on, but when Krishna appears as a Brahman, this Asita, this another Asita, another non-whitish person, a dwarf Brahman, he rejected all the qualities of a Brahman, actually, such as peacefulness, straightforwardness, honesty, transparency. So he enjoyed all the offerings made by Bali Maharaj, and then Bhamandev cast Bali down from his throne, his lordship of the three worlds, and he threw him into a hole below the earth, Patala-lok. Just as a crow first will eat again the food. If a donor comes and gives food to a crow, the crow will come, eat the food, and they will hurt the hand that was feeding him with its beak. So similarly, this Asita, this dwarf Asita, he had this righteous, dharmic Bali Maharaj. He was bound up by him, by his own associates like Garuda, Sunanda, all of them tied up Bali Maharaj. And finally, he was thrown into the nether worlds, Patalalok. So again, this Vaman, there was the son of the great sage Kasyapa. He was a brahmachari, but he makes my heart tremble with fear when I remember his evil behavior, basically. Because why? He adopted the dark complexion. This dark complexion is ruining everything. An alternative reading of this last part is that actually Vamandev tied Bali just like a crow. A crow, again, devours all the offerings and then calls other crows, surrounds the person who was doing all this offering and starts to mock that person. So similarly, Vamandev called his own people and then surrounded Bali and tormented him, bullying him. So of course, then Sri Radha will say, according to Vishwanath, enough of friendship with all this asita, this non-white, this all that black complexion man. Enough of that. We are gold complexion ladies. So virtuous, so chaste. And despite all the varieties of friendship we have had with that black man, that black boy, not even one has proven auspicious. All the different approaches and experiences, all of them ended in inauspiciousness. So one should be extremely cautious of Krishna because he has such a black heart, such an impure nature. Therefore, what use do we have for such a person? So again, according to Vishwanath, the Bumblebee will say, but how is your own heart pure if you are constantly criticizing others? I mean, I'm hearing you for verse after verse criticizing the impurity of others. So someone may criticize the impurity of another, but how pure you are if you're just engaging in that. In other words, you are continuing speaking about Krishna. So Sri Radha replies here, talking about Krishna's activities in his past lives is hard to give up, even though that makes us unhappy. So we know we should not be speaking about Krishna, but we cannot stop talking about him, whether we criticize him or not. So that's the standard of Braj. They may speak nicely about Krishna lovingly, or they may criticize Krishna, but whatever they speak, whether it be praise or criticism, is all converging in Krishna. That's the Vraja-kata, the Vraja gossip, if you will. Or another meaning that he's giving to this last line, Dustyajas tat katartha, is that although we have given him up, Dustyajas, we cannot stop talking about him. Vishwanath Chakrabarti Thakur mentioned that the subject is not mentioned in the phrase Dustyajas tat katartha. It is just saying impossible to give up topics about Krishna. Actually, it is not saying it is impossible for me. Shira is saying it is impossible to stop speaking about him. So with this, Vishwanath mentions that implies that this idea infers that not only for the gopis this is impossible to stop doing, but for everyone, for the great sages, for everyone in Braj, it's difficult to give up about speaking about Krishna. Again, this is indirectly chanting the glories of Harikatha by the topmost speaker of Harikatha, Śrīmatī Rādhārāṇī herself. So basically, this is the idea she's presenting here. I do not need any friendship with this black person, but I'm still unable to give up the treasure of the topics about him. I can give up everything, basically, Sri Radha is saying, including Krishna, she's telling to the Bumblebee. I can even leave your friend, but I cannot give up speaking about him. That's how she's surviving, basically. She's saying indirectly, I can only survive, I am only surviving this harsh separation by continually speaking about him. I think we have shared this before, but we can share this one famous lila that is presented as a result of one verse from Prabodhananda Saraswati's Radha Rasa Sudanidhi that shows an example of the addiction, healthy addiction that Sri Radha has regarding Krishna in every single sense. And so sometimes, again, in Man, Sri Radha may be angry with Krishna and say, 3 resolutions. She makes 3 vows, and we will see how Krishna breaks them all immediately. I will not look at him anymore. I won't speak about him anymore. I won't touch him anymore. So first she said, I won't look at him anymore. She asked to her friends, please help me to sustain my vow. I don't want to engage in niyama akshama. taking vows and then not being able to sustain them. So I will not look at him anymore, but Krishna appears on the scene and starts to speak very sweetly, as if he's begging Sri Radha, look at me just once. So the Sakis, knowing this, because Krishna says, I will make your friend break her vows immediately. So the Sakis say, great, we want to have fun. Let's see that. So help me, Krishna says, okay. So the Sakis start to speak with each other, like if they are speaking on their ears, but in a way that Radha hears. And they are saying, oh, how sweetly Krishna is standing there as Tribanga-lalita in threefold bending form. The life of that lady that does not see that sweetness is totally wasted. So Sri Radha is hearing all those things, and she becomes eventually eager. So, okay, I will just look at him 1 second, and that's all. So she looks for a minute, and of course, it's not just a second, it's one, and again, and she kind of just stopped drinking his beauty. So, first resolution, broken. And her second resolution will be this point. I won't speak about him. But Krishna starts to speak about to her in this way, implore her mercy, falling at her feet. And rather than one point, he cannot stay silent and starts to tell him, okay, you came with your marks of love from this night with Chandravali. Go to that girl you love now. Now, what are you doing here now in our conj? Speaking all these clever words. But the point is, she starts to speak to Krishna. So second vow is gone. And Sri Radha says to her friends, you have to help me to maintain my vows. The friends say, we are here, but you are yourself choosing to do that. You are breaking your vow. And again, the third vow is, I won't touch Krishna. But Krishna again tries to implore to Radha and try to bring his foot close to her foot and touch the tips of Sri Radha's toes. And this creates a wave of ecstasy in her and makes her unsteady. So she very angrily takes Krishna by the hand and pushes him out of the kunja. But again, she's touching Krishna. So Sri Radha realized, oh my God, now I touch him. So if I cannot keep any vow, how can I keep him away from my life? So at that moment, she tells the Sakis and managers, please bring him back. What to do? No? I cannot live without him. So similarly here, in this verse, we can see her healthy transcendental addiction to Harikatha. This is a big lesson for us sadhakas, because again, we are in a different situation, of course, in a different types of separation, but she's showing us here how we are supposed to survive in our particular separation from Krishna. How? The same way she's doing, in a different way, but in the same way at the same time. Harikatha, which is not different from Hari. So that's a very important point. So in this way, we see in this verse this interesting notion of also Sri Radha again expressing Aishwarya for Krishna, but at the same time increasing her intimacy to him, calling him his Ishvara. Purnamasi told us that. But they actually never act with him like if he's God. That's the nature of their Ishvar Bhav. Sri Radha will tell Krishna, come to me. The red lac on my feet is no longer there. You should repaint it. And she will give orders on that level. So, of course, if they order him to perform so many services, they also became angry, criticized him. But if they were actually aware of Krishna's godhood, they couldn't have behaved like that. So, again, the ultimate consideration is not Krishna's God. So, if at some point that comes only with the purpose of nourishing intimacy. So what's the type of Chitrajalpa person in this verse? Let's try almost to conclude with that. First of all, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur mentions that the first line, when Sri Radha is describing the shooting of Bali, that indicates Krishna's ruthless, cruel nature. Then the fact of Krishna being controlled, or in the form of Sri Ram, by a woman indicates Krishna's lust. And third, accepting offerings in an ungrateful way indicates Krishna's fraudulent. So all this, and the expression, let's stop the friendship with that black fellow, indicates fear and malice. And that Krishna is not worthy of becoming attached to. So all these ingredients, again, properly mixed and put together, will correspond with a particular type of mad talk or Chitrajalpa, which Srila Rupa Goswami describes as Avajalpa. in his Ujjval Nilaman. He describes Avajalpa, and then he gives this verse an example of that type of Chitrajalpa. So what's Avajalpa? Rupa Goswami says, saintly persons have concluded that when a lover, impelled by jealousy and fear, declares that Lord Hari is unworthy of her attachment because of his harshness, lustiness, and dishonesty, such speech is called Avajalpa. So these three elements, harshness, lustiness, and dishonesty, are represented in these first three lines of this verse. Avajalpa. So let's conclude by sharing, with your permission, also one more time to make full circle and try to read this verse one more time through the lotus mouth of Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He has a Bengali poeticized version of it. We will just share the English translation of it one more time. Try to reflect on this particular shloka. It says, O Bumblebee, when the descriptions of Krishna's previous births come to the mind, the gopis are becoming afraid. In his descent as Ram, the Lord acted just like a hunter and killed Bali in a cruel and unfair manner. When Surpanaka, possessed with lust, came to Ram, he cut off her nose and ears, being attached to Sita. In the form of Vamana, he robbed, killed Bali by deceit, accepting his offerings of worship. He bound this virtuous person with ropes as a crowd. O Bumblebee, it is not good to make friends with him. I know that the wealth of talks about him is difficult to give up. Therefore, I consider myself weak in the matter of this renunciation. So, of course, for us, that weakness Sri Radha refers to is her topmost strength. I cannot give up, speaking about Krishna, I cannot give up Harikatha. So let us conclude, as I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, to share some few more verses from Hamsadutta. As we shared in the previous class, some verses from Hamsadutta, and I mentioned we'll share some more verses of Hamsadutta to conclude this section here. And that's a very interesting connection, because today we shared a verse where Sri Radha speaks of Krishna and some of the Das avatars. And today I would like to share some of these some verses of Hamsadutta, also in connection to the Das avatars. Remember, Hamsadutta is a poem written by Rupa Goswami where Sri Lalita Devi is sending a message to Krishna in Mathura through a swan, describing the condition of Sri Radha in separation from him. So the context of this section is that after telling the swan to speak to all of Krishna's ornaments, Sri Radha sends direct personalized messages to Krishna's garland, Krishna's earrings, Krishna's kastuba gem, Krishna's conch shell, and so on. Then Lalita will tell the swan to conclude his message by saying the following to Krishna, where he will compare him to the different Das avatars, and of course abuse him in that context. Is Lalita Devi, what to do. So I will share some of them. We have shared each of the 10 of these in social media some time back. So I will share some of them today with you. Kurma, Narasimha, Vaman, Dev, Kalki avatar. So regarding relation to Kurma, Dev, Sri Lalita sends the following message to Krishna through the swan. O Krishna, my pitiable friend was attracted to you when she saw your attractive form and your dalliances. She was both curious and greatly enlivened. But when she approached you, you immediately started to behave like a tortoise, hiding your beautiful limbs and showing only a hard shell. Is such behavior proper? So here Lalita is compared Krishna to Kurma, like a turtle makes pratyaksha, retires or his senses inside, disappears basically, that's the idea, and then showing a hard shell, hard heart by leaving them. The second verse is connected to Nrsimhadev. So Sri Lalita says, speaking to Krishna through the swan, although your pastimes as half man and half lion are long since past, you have not yet abandoned the mood of that incarnation. At that time, you showed favor to Prahlad, while to others you displayed extreme cruelty, tearing open their hearts. This time also, you have shown preference for Akrura, while you tear open our hearts by leaving us so feelinglessly. So this is the analogy and the symbol, the parallel with Nrsimhadev. You became partial to Prahlad, which of course, okay, and tear apart the chest of Hiranyakashipu, and she makes the parallel. You became partial to Akrura, who took you out of Vrindavan and opened up your chest, killed us almost. Then it's the turn of Vamandev. Oh, dwarf incarnation. Just as Bali ignored his guru, remember, Sukracharya, who is the guru of the Asuras, Bali was born in a Asura family, and Sukracharya told, do not satisfy the demands of that Vamandev. He's asking for charity, but it's tricky. Vishnu is tricky. Do not obey him. But Bali Maharaj disobeyed his guru, who was saying, do not surrender to Krishna. You should abandon a guru who tells you that. So here Lalita is saying, just as Bali ignored his guru, so Radha has ignored the wishes of her elders, believing in the power of her love and that by it you were hers. In this way, she surrendered herself, as Bali also represents surrender of the self, Atmanivedanam. In this way, she surrendered herself along with the kingdom of her mind to you completely, like Bali Maharaj offered her kingdom to Bama. For this, she got her just reward, for you have shackled her in the bonds of unfulfilled love and thrown her far away from you, just as Baman bound Bali in chains and exiled him to the lower planets. Then, last verse I want to share from the Hamsadutta, almost the concluding section of the book. It's direct to Kalki Avatar, the last one of the 10 main descents of Bhagavan. O Kalki, and here we see how Sri Lalita, even though she's chastising Krishna, at the same time she's imploring to him, please return to Raj, save the life of us all, especially of Sri Radha. So she will say this indirectly to Krishna while referring to him as Kalki. O Kalki, come here to your homeland, and with the vine-like sword of your loving sidelong glances, surrounded by big black bees, maddened by their sweetness, cut apart the infidel suffering born of your separation. Come and show your love for the cowherd man, and make the land of Vrindavan a place with the happy Radha again, just as Kalki will make the world fit for the righteous. So Braj is the place of the highest Dharma, Prema Dharma. So they are the more righteous people. So Kalki is there to facilitate everything for the righteous. So you are Kalki, Krishna. So please come and make Vrindavan again a place with a happy Sri Radha here. She's about to die, basically, she's implying. So these are some of the verses of Hamsadutta I wanted to share. There's one more verse I will share with you, with your permission, in the same line from the Vidakta Madhava Rupa Goswami. This is only one verse, verse 73 for the fourth act, where Lalita again is speaking and again is referring to the 10 Das avatars, in this case the 10 of them very briefly, in connection to Krishna, in connection to chastising him lovingly. So Sri Lalita says, O Krishna, all your avatars all remain within your own self. We can clearly see their symptoms in you. You possess the restlessness of Matsya. The fish cannot remain fixed, so you are quite agitated. You possess the hardness of Kurma, as we spoke again regarding the shell. You possess Barahas touching the earth, like touching us. You possess the cruel fingernails of Nrsimhadev, as we already explained. You possess a taste for deception, like Bhaman. You possess the intense ferocity of Parasuram. You possess the power to crush Ravan, like Ramachandra. You are crushing us now. You possess the continual drunkenness of Balaram. You are always intoxicated in romanticism. You possess Buddha's wish to stop sacrifices. We know Buddha wanted to cancel all sacrifices in the name of the Vedas. The same way, the gopis meeting with Krishna are considered like Kandarpa Yajna, the sacrifice of Cupid. So now you left us, so you sing Buddha, your wish to stop sacrifice. And you possess Kali's, you exhibit Kalki's pastime of attacking with a raised sword. So you're leaving us is like that attack. So this is a verse of also Vidagdha Madhava in connection with verses from Hamsadutta and in connection with the verse we are studying today, where the Dasavatar were invoked basically by Sri Radha in the context of increasing her love for Krishna, basically, although outwardly criticizing him. So some ideas we wanted to share today. We have some extra minutes. If anyone has any question you may like to present, now it's the moment. I don't know if there are there any questions. You can just, I gave the option in YouTube and Zoom to unmute yourself, or you can send a text message. Okay. Seems we have no questions today, so we'll stop here. Thank you so much for your time. And as usual, we will conclude by offering our pranam to the Harikatha shared by Sri Radha and the gopis, as Uddhava prayed before leaving Braj, who perpetually putting his head in the foot dust of them and their Harikatha, which has the potential to purify, to redeem all the three planetary systems. So we are part of that. We are in the midst of that journey, and therefore we pray to be blessed by the context and allow for this Harikatha to really become ingrained in us and enter into the deepest chambers of our heart. Vandinanda Brajastrinam Padarenum Abhikshnasaya Samharikatad Gitam Unati Bhuvanatri. Srila Gurudev ki jai, Shriman Mahaprabhu ki jai, Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai, Grantara Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai, Shri Bhramara-gita ki jai, Shri Ekadasi ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Gaur Praman Hari Bol. Mancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyaiva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Ananta koti vaishnava vrinda ki jai. Gaur Gaur Hari Bol.